The desert evening always arrived like a slow, deliberate breath. It did not fall or descend. It settled as though the sun itself were weary and sinking down for rest. Fort Caden stood half-buried in this fading light, its rusting fences and cracked concrete catching the dying glow like relics of a long quiet ruin. Time moved strangely here. Some nights felt like minutes, others lasted entire lifetimes. On the far western edge of the base, where the old training field lay abandoned, a crooked metal bench waited. The paint had peeled off completely. Rust devoured its legs. But it still held the shape of a seat, still held the weight of a man who returned every evening as if pulled by an invisible cord. Sergeant Marcus Hale lowered himself onto the bench with the slow stiffness of someone whose bones had long ago learned to ache. He rubbed his palms together, the desert wind scraping dry air across calloused skin. He didn't come here for the view, though the horizon was beautiful at dusk. He didn't come for the silence, though it wrapped around the field like a blanket no one else could see. He came because this was where his mind was the loudest, and because nowhere else felt honest. He sat. He breathed. He waited, though even he couldn't say for what. The wind hummed low and hollow, winding through the empty bleachers and snapping loose tarps against the fence. Sometimes it sounded like whispers. Sometimes footsteps. Sometimes, on the worst nights, it sounded like the last breaths of men he once knew. Tonight, something about the air felt different. Too still. Too expectant. The kind of stillness that happens right before memory breaks through the surface. Marcus closed his eyes, and the battlefield rose to meet him. It came without warning, sand exploding upward, fire whipping across the edges of his vision, his heart thudding like a fist inside his throat. He smelled burning oil, cordite, blood. Heard Miller shouting over the roar of mortars. Heard Dawson's voice, bright, terrified, alive, calling his name. Hale. Sarge. You good? You with me? He always tried to answer, even in the dream. His lips moved now, barely forming the words. I'm here. I'm here. But the ridge didn't listen. Memory never does. Dawson's face flashed, too young, too hopeful, always turned toward him. Sand clung to his eyelashes. A smudge of dirt streaked his cheek. He clutched that notebook to his chest even while they were taking fire, as if words were armor. Then the dream snapped. A gunshot cracked the world in half. Dawson's body jerked. The notebook flew from his hand. And Marcus always woke just before he hit the ground. Tonight was no different. His eyes burst open, breath ragged, chest tight. The desert had returned. The bench beneath him was real. The silence was real. The pain was real. He pressed the heel of his palm over his left eye, massaging the headache forming there. The ghosts were coming more often as the years passed, no longer only in sleep, but in the thin membrane between moments. He wasn't sure how much longer he could carry them. A crunch of footsteps pulled him back. Not memory this time. Real. Marcus lifted his head. A young soldier approached across the sand, walking as though the ground itself might crack open beneath him. The boy couldn't have been more than 20. His uniform looked almost too crisp, too new, as if it still belonged on a store hanger. His hands trembled discreetly at his sides, though he tried to hide it. Sergeant Hale? He asked, voice uncertain. Marcus nodded once. His posture straightened, old instincts firing even years out of active duty. You found me. They said you'd be here. They? Marcus asked, raising a brow. Command. Actually, just about everyone. The young soldier swallowed. My name's Private Liam Dorsey. I'm shipping out in 2 weeks. They told me, he hesitated. They told me you could tell me what it really means to serve. Marcus did not answer right away. He studied the boy, the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of fear behind his eyes, the determination stitched just barely into place over the uncertainty. Liam reminded him too much of Dawson. Too much of himself, maybe. You sure you want the truth? Marcus asked quietly. Liam drew in a breath. Yes, sir. Then sit. The boy obeyed, lowering himself onto the other end of the bench. As he did, the metal creaked and Marcus flinched at the sound. For a split second it sounded like the groan of steel under fire, like the collapsing shell of a burning transport back in Ridge 14. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself. You hear stories about glory, he began, voice low, but they never tell you about the weight of a name. Liam frowned slightly. A name? Marcus nodded. Every soldier carries two. The one on your chest. He tapped the patch sewn onto his uniform jacket. And the one you whisper when the bullets fly. The name you pray you'll see again if you make it home. The wind kicked sand across their boots. Liam shifted slightly, drawing his jacket tighter as though the air had grown colder. Marcus wasn't looking at him anymore. His gaze drifted past the young private, past the bleachers, past the horizon. It moved into a place Liam could not see, a place Marcus kept locked behind his ribs. "It was my third deployment," he said. "Ridge 14. Hell of a place. Dust storms thick as sin. The sky always looked bruised." He paused. "We were outnumbered 20 to 1. Dug in behind busted vehicles, ammo running low. Radio dead." The boy listened with a stillness that bordered on reverence. "It was just me and my squad," Marcus continued. "Cade, Torres, Miller, and Dawson. The kid who never stopped talking about becoming a writer when he got out." A faint smile ghosted across his face. "He used to read us lines from that damn notebook even when we were supposed to be sleeping." The smile faded. "When the enemy advanced, we didn't hear them," Marcus said quietly. "We felt them. The ground vibrated under our boots like a drum before a storm." Liam's hands tightened on his knees. "What did you do?" he whispered. "What we were trained to do," Marcus replied simply. "Fight." The desert faded again, the ridge rising once more at the edges of memory. But Marcus forced it back this time, pinning it shut with his breath. He didn't let the vision swallow him. He spoke instead, letting the boy hear the truth that so many hid. Cade took a hit to the leg. Torres dragged him behind a wreck. Miller covered us until his rifle jammed. His voice began to crack. "And Dawson? Dawson was shot trying to pull me out after I got pinned." Silence thickened between them. Marcus stared down at his hands, hands that once dug trenches, loaded rifles, pressed over wounds. Hands that once held a young soldier as his life slipped through them. He reached slowly toward his jacket pocket. Liam leaned forward, watching. Marcus withdrew a small, weathered notebook, its corners frayed, its cover bleached by sand and sun. It looked fragile, as though too much handling might dissolve it. "He made me promise," Marcus whispered. "If I made it home, I'd tell his story. Make sure he wasn't forgotten." Liam accepted the notebook with both hands, carefully, reverently. His mouth parted slightly as though he could feel the weight of the stories trapped inside. "Why are you giving this to me?" he asked. "Because you're the next chapter," Marcus said. "Every generation of soldier carries the stories of the ones before. If you're going to serve, serve with their memory, not just your orders." The young private stared at the notebook for a long time before finally looking up. "I won't forget them." For the first time that evening, Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that had been coiled tight for years. He exhaled slowly and the breath didn't hurt. "Then you'll do fine," he said. Liam rose to his feet, smoothed the front of his uniform, and snapped into a clean, respectful salute. Marcus returned it, slower, older, but with a sincerity that reached deeper than muscle memory. When the boy left, walking back toward the barracks, Marcus stayed on the bench, eyes fixed on the fading heat shimmer along the sand. For a moment he felt the ridge recede. Not disappear, but step back. For the first time in years he didn't feel alone. When Liam's silhouette disappeared beyond the far barracks, the desert swallowed the last of the daylight. Darkness crept in, slow at first, then all at once, as if someone had pulled a black shroud across the sky. The moon was thin tonight, a sliver of white suspended above Fort Caden like a watchful, indifferent eye. Marcus stayed on the bench long after the boy vanished, long after the wind softened into silence. Something inside him felt cracked open, not broken but unsealed. He wasn't sure yet whether it was a relief or a danger. The notebook's absence left an odd emptiness in his jacket pocket. 4 years it had sat there, heavy as a stone and light as a promise. Now his fingers brushed only fabric, and the hollow feeling made his chest tighten. "Dawson," he murmured. The name tasted like dust. He inhaled sharply, bracing himself as the night deepened. And then it began. The first sign was the hush. Not ordinary quiet. Fort Caden always had that. This was different. A vacuum. A sudden, unnatural absence of sound. No wind. No distant generators. Not even the buzz of insects. Marcus felt it like pressure against his ears. Then came the flicker. It started at the edges of his vision. Tiny pulses of red and gold, flashing like sparks swallowed by the dark. For a moment he thought they were fireflies. Then he saw the sand shift. His heartbeat slowed, then sped, then stumbled altogether. "No," he whispered. "Not tonight." But the ridge didn't care what he wanted. The sand began to ripple outward from his boots as if something beneath the surface were breathing, slow, massive breaths that made the ground rise and fall like the chest of a sleeping giant. He closed his eyes, fighting it. Not here. Not in the open. not where the boy had just sat. But memory had never respected boundaries. When he opened his eyes again, Fort Caden was gone. He was kneeling behind a burned-out vehicle, the air thick with smoke, the sky bruised purple and black. The taste of grit coated his tongue. His throat ached from shouting words he could no longer remember. A mortar exploded somewhere behind him. The shockwave rattled the metal beside him, ringing through his jaw. He ducked and covered his head instinctively. "Miller," he shouted. No answer. Just the rapid, metallic click of an empty rifle. He turned. And the ghost of Miller was crouched 10 feet away, face streaked with sweat and soot, trying desperately to clear the jam in his weapon. His hands shook. His breath came in ragged shreds. "Miller, get down," Marcus yelled. But Miller didn't move. Because Miller wasn't real. Not anymore. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. "You're not here," he whispered. "You're not." Another voice cut through the chaos. "Hey, Sarge." Marcus's eyes snapped open. There he was. Dawson. Not the ghost. Not the memory. The boy, alive, grinning, dust smudged across his cheek, notebook stuffed into his vest like always. Except the smile wasn't quite right. It didn't reach his eyes. And the air around him shimmered, like heat mirage. Like he wasn't made of flesh but of memory barely holding shape. Marcus's stomach turned. Dawson stepped forward. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus swallowed hard. "I see a lot of things." "Yeah," Dawson said softly. "You never stopped." Marcus's hands trembled. He pressed his palms flat against the ground, feeling the vibrating earth, the phantom thunder of approaching enemy vehicles. This wasn't a memory. It wasn't a dream. It was something in between. A place where the mind folds back on itself and refuses to let the dead stay dead. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked, his voice raw. "You tell me," Dawson said. His head tilted slightly as though listening to distant poetry only he could hear. "You're the one who keeps bringing me back." "I didn't choose this." "Didn't you?" Dawson asked, stepping closer. His boot made no sound on the sand. "You carry me everywhere. You carry all of us." Marcus felt a sharp, squeezing ache in his chest. "I carry what I owe." "No," Dawson said gently. "You carry guilt." Marcus flinched. The world around them shifted, shadows stretching, metal groaning, the ridge breathing in ragged pulses. The sky flickered with distant fire. Dawson knelt beside him. His voice softened. "Sarge, I never blamed you." "You should have," Marcus whispered, throat tight. Dawson shook his head. "Blame doesn't belong to the living." Marcus jolted. "What does that mean?" But Dawson's face had changed, flickering between youth and death, between the boy he was and the body Marcus had dragged through the sand. His eyes shifted from warm brown to empty black, like bullet holes. Marcus recoiled. And suddenly the ridge erupted in gunfire again, loud, deafening, impossibly real. Dawson's body jerked with the impact. The notebook flew from his hands. Marcus reached for him. And the world shattered. He lurched forward, gasping, drenched in sweat. Fort Caden snapped back into place around him. Cold metal bench, empty field, distant hum of generators. His heart slammed against his ribs. He inhaled sharply, choking on the remnants of the vision. "Not again," he rasped. "Not again, not again." He pressed both hands to his face. His breath shook. The ghosts weren't fading, they were getting sharper. More vivid. More present. He needed grounding. Something real. But for the first time in years he didn't have the notebook. He had given it to Liam. A decision that had felt right an hour ago now hovered in his mind like a severed rope, connection cut, anchor gone. "Dawson," he whispered, voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The wind finally returned, a soft, natural breeze. It brushed across his face, cooling the sweat on his skin. Almost like a hand. Almost like an answer. He leaned back, eyes closed, letting the night hold him. But relief was fleeting. Because the ridge hadn't just resurfaced. It had begun watching. He felt it, an invisible presence at the edge of his vision, lingering in the dark, waiting for the next breach in his defenses. Fort Caden was supposed to be his refuge. But tonight the ghosts had followed him. And they were growing restless. Marcus didn't remember standing. Didn't remember crossing the training field. Didn't remember unlocking the door to his quarters. He only remembered sitting on the edge of his bunk, staring at his hands. The tremors wouldn't stop. He pressed his palms together tightly, trying to still them. They shook harder. Finally he buried his face in them and let out a muffled, broken sound. A sound he'd denied himself for years. He wasn't sure whether it was a sob or a scream. The line between the two had blurred a long time ago. Hours passed. Maybe minutes. Time warped and stretched. At some point he lay back on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. The overhead light flickered occasionally, not broken, just old, but each blink made him tense, waiting for the ridge to swallow the world again. He tried to sleep. He shouldn't have. The dream came instantly. He stood in the center of a vast, open desert, flat, endless, silent. The sky overhead was starless, moonless, blank. The air was cold enough to burn. A single figure stood in the distance. Marcus walked toward him with heavy steps. As he approached, the figure resolved into a young man sitting cross-legged in the sand, head bent, writing in a notebook. Dawson. But not the Dawson Marcus remembered. This one was older, maybe 23, 24, the age he would have been if he'd survived. His hair was slightly longer. His shoulders broader. His expression calmer, wiser. Marcus's breath caught. Dawson looked up and met his eyes. "You never let me grow up," he said. Marcus's throat tightened until he could barely breathe. "What?" "You keep me frozen," Dawson said softly. 18 forever. Half finished. Half lived. Marcus shook his head slowly, tears burning at the edges of his eyes. "I don't choose the memories." "Then stop letting them choose you." The desert wind rose, whipping around them, harsh and cold, carrying whispers Marcus had tried to forget. "It should have been you." "Why him? Why not you?" "Your fault. Your fault." Marcus staggered backward, hands over his ears. Dawson stood, closing the notebook gently. "You're not keeping me alive," he said. "You're keeping me from resting." Marcus's knees buckled. He fell to the sand, gasping, shaking. I didn't. I only wanted to." "What?" Dawson asked softly. "Make it right?" Marcus looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Yes." Dawson's expression softened. "You can't make the past right," he said. "But you can stop letting it drown you." The world began to dissolve, sand blowing away like ash, sky cracking apart, Dawson fading into light. His last words echoed. "Tell the story, but don't live in it." Marcus jolted awake, clutching the sheets. His heart hammered, but his hands were still. For the first time in years they were steady. He stared at them in shock. Darkness lay heavy across the room, but a sliver of moonlight cut across the floor, soft and silver. Marcus drew a breath, not smooth, not easy, but deep. A real breath. The dream lingered, aching, raw but different. He wasn't running from it. He wasn't drowning in it. He was hearing it. He sat there for a long time, breathing. Then, for the first time in years, he whispered, "Thank you." Part 3, The Notebook in the News. Liam reads Dawson's writings. Marcus faces morning after the nightmare. A message arrives that changes everything. The sun crawled over Fort Caden like someone dragging a blade along the horizon, slow, sharp, and thin. Dawn was never soft here. It came with a pale, metallic light that made everything look stark and exposed. The fences, the cracked walkways, the aging barracks. Even Marcus. He stepped outside his quarters, blinking against the brightness. His eyes felt raw, swollen. His body felt hollow, as though he'd left half of himself inside the dream and hadn't retrieved it. But his hands were steady. That alone unnerved him. He stood for a long moment under the morning sky, letting the cool air scrape across his lungs. The dream clung to him, not like a fog but like a new scar, painful, sharp, undeniable. "You never let me grow up. Stop letting the memories choose you." Dawson's older face lingered vividly. Too vivid. As though his mind had reached into the future and shaped what could never be. It felt real but not quite like a haunting. More like something his conscience had finally forced to the surface. Marcus exhaled slowly. Today would be different. He didn't know how or why or what that meant. He only knew it would. Liam had not slept. The barracks were quiet at dawn, save for the occasional snore or shift of boots. Liam sat alone on his bunk, elbows on knees, Dawson's notebook open in his hands. He hadn't meant to read it immediately. He had meant to wait, to treat it like something sacred. But as soon as he reached his room, the notebook seemed to look at him. Not invitingly. Not ominously. Just openly, like a door cracked wide enough that curiosity slipped through. By midnight he was about 50 pages in. By 2 a.m. he was crying silently into his pillow so the others wouldn't hear. The notebook wasn't filled with war stories. It was filled with life. Messy handwriting, crossed out lines, poems about home, tiny sketches in the margins, like drawings done between breaths. A page written in a shaky hand. Day 89. Heard Sarge say he misses the sound of rain. I don't remember it well myself. Maybe I'll write a rain poem. Something about water falling on a place that needs it. Something that feels like forgiveness. I'll show him when it's done. I think he needs something gentle. Another page. To Kate. Stop stealing my granola bars. I know it's you. I counted them. Another. To myself. When I get home I'll write a book about this place. Not to glorify it but so the sand stops owning the memories. And another, darker, scribbled. What if I don't get home? Would the world forget me? Would anyone tell the story right? Maybe Sarge would. He listens even when he pretends he doesn't. Maybe he'd remember the good parts of me. The parts one forget when I'm scared. Liam had stopped reading then because tears blurred the ink. He wasn't ready for the last pages yet. The ones written the night before Ridge 14. He was scared of what they would say. Now with the sun rising he turned the page. And his breath caught. The night before Ridge 14, Dawson's entry. The guys are asleep. I should be too but my chest feels tight. I keep thinking about home, about Mom's kitchen and my stupid dog in the creek behind our house. I wonder if the water still runs clear. Sarge says to sleep when I can, but how do you sleep when the world feels like it's holding its breath? If anything happens tomorrow. No, not writing that. Crossed out lines. If anything happens, I hope someone finds this notebook. Not because I think I'm important, but because I want someone to know I love this life even when it scared me. And I want someone to tell Sarge. Line ends abruptly. Liam's throat tightened. Someone needed to tell Sarge what? His fingers hovered over the page as if he might feel the answer through the paper. He closed the notebook gently. His deployment date loomed in his mind, just 12 days now. He had come to Fort Caden expecting training drills, marching formations and stern sergeants shouting orders. He had not expected to inherit a dead soldier's words. He had not expected to feel them inside his ribs like a second heartbeat. He needed to talk to Marcus. Right now. Marcus walked the perimeter. Not because he needed to. Not because he was assigned to. Simply because movement grounded him. He traced the chain-link fence with his fingertips as he walked, feeling each vibration through the metal, feeling the subtle thrum of Fort Caden waking up. Soldiers were forming lines. Boots stomped on pavement. Voices called out morning commands. The world felt real again. Mostly. He kept waiting for the ridge to claw back through. Waiting for Miller's shadow to flicker at the corner of his eye. Waiting for Dawson's steps to crunch behind him. But the ghosts were quiet. Not gone. Just quiet. As he rounded the southwest corner, he heard footsteps running. Sergeant Hale. Marcus stopped and turned. Liam sprinted toward him, breathless, clutching the notebook like a lifeline. Marcus frowned. Something wrong? Liam slowed to a halt and stood there panting, his face flushed from urgency rather than exertion. He held the notebook out but didn't let go. I read it, he said. A lot of it. I didn't mean to read so much, it just... He swallowed hard. I needed to talk to you. Marcus said nothing. He simply waited. Liam opened the notebook to the last entry. Sarge, he was writing about you. Marcus's breath hitched before he could hide it. He said he wanted someone to tell you something, Liam continued. But the line cuts off. I don't know what he was trying to say. Marcus's jaw clenched. His gaze dropped to the incomplete sentence, a wound of ink. I want someone to tell Sarge. Dawson had never gotten to finish the thought. Marcus had carried that unfinished line like a weight, but seeing it fresh, held by new hands, it pierced in a different way. The boy's voice softened. I want to understand what it meant to him. And to you. Marcus closed the notebook slowly. Walk with me, he said. They moved side by side along the dusty path, silence growing thick between them. Marcus didn't speak until they reached the far end of the training field, the spot where the bench sat lonely and crooked. He nodded toward it. Sit. Liam obeyed. Marcus didn't. He stayed standing, hands clasped loosely behind him, staring out at the barren land beyond the fence. That line, he began quietly, was Dawson's way of saying he trusted me. Even when he was scared. Especially when he was scared. Liam watched him with careful, steady eyes. He wanted someone to tell me, Marcus's voice grew hoarse, that I had been worth following. Liam swallowed. But he didn't write that. No, Marcus said softly. Because he didn't need to. His gaze hardened. Dawson told me with the way he lived. With the way he fought. With the way he died. Liam lowered his eyes. Marcus continued. The young ones, the ones like you, like him, you think courage is about not feeling fear. But real courage is when you're terrified and you go anyway. He looked at Liam. Dawson was braver than any of us. Liam's voice shook. I don't know if I'm brave. Marcus turned toward him fully. Good. That means you're paying attention. The boy let out a small broken laugh. Then a deep voice cut across the field. Sergeant Hale. Both men turned. A communications officer jogged toward them, expression tense. Marcus's stomach dropped. A feeling he knew too well. The officer reached them. Sergeant, you're needed at command. Now. Marcus's heartbeat slowed, thickened. What's going on? He asked. The officer glanced at Liam before leaning in. There's been an incident overseas, he murmured. Your private here's deployment group. Liam stiffened. Marcus's jaw tightened. What kind of incident? Marcus demanded. The officer hesitated. Fatalities, sir. And the world, and the ghosts, lurched awake again. The desert night pressed down like a hand around Marcus's throat. He sat alone on the bench again, Dawson's notebook resting beside him. He'd placed it there as if it were a companion, though its presence felt more like a weight than company. The last page he had read earlier still throbbed in his mind, a line Dawson had written only hours before Ridge 14. If war is a god, then its altar is built from the parts of boys pretending to be men. Marcus closed his eyes. The wind shifted. Something in it sounded like footsteps. The dream that arrived before sleep. He didn't drift off, he fell into sleep like a man slipping beneath ice. 1 second he stared at the sand, the next he was somewhere else entirely. Ridge 14 again. Of course. But not the ridge he remembered. This one was twisted, rearranged as if memory itself were decomposing. Vehicles melted into strange shapes. The sky hung too low as if the clouds were listening. And the dust behaved like it was breathing. Marcus found himself standing where Dawson had fallen, only the body wasn't there. Instead, Dawson was sitting upright in the sand. Writing. Just writing. His helmet was cracked. His face was pale except for the smear of dried blood across his cheek, and yet his hand moved across the notebook with urgency, as if the world depended on what he wrote. Marcus stepped closer. Dawson, he whispered. The young soldier didn't look up. Marcus kneeled beside him. Dawson, you're dead. Dawson's pencil froze. He lifted his face, but his eyes were pitch black, pupils drowned in ink. Everyone dies, Sarge, he said in a calm, hollow voice. But not everyone leaves something behind. The dream began to distort around them, colors deepening, darkening, the sky now streaked with red like a wound. Dawson leaned forward. You made a promise, he murmured, and now his voice was layered, the real Dawson and something else beneath it. You said you'd tell my story. Marcus swallowed. His throat ached. I'm trying. Not enough, Dawson whispered. You left parts out. You pretend you forgot. But I know what you hide. Marcus shook his head. No, I remember everything. Then say it. Marcus felt the dream pushing against him like a storm. Say it, Dawson repeated louder, sharper, the ink in his eyes swirling. Marcus took a step back. What do you want from me? Dawson didn't move. He only lifted the notebook, the same notebook Marcus kept in his jacket, and held it out. Finish it, Dawson said. Tell him. Tell Liam. Tell the next one who sits where you sit now. Marcus's chest tightened. Liam's already gone. He deployed. Dawson nodded slowly. I know. I saw him. A chill ran through Marcus. What do you mean you saw him? But Dawson's form began to dissolve. His skin peeled into sand. His body turned into paper that tore in the wind. His voice, however, remained whole. He's the next chapter, it echoed. But chapters can burn. You know that. You've seen it. The dream cracked. Literally, as if the sky were made of glass. And through the fractures, Marcus saw something that didn't belong to any memory. A convoy. Smoke. A battlefield he'd never visited, not yet. And in the middle of it, a soldier wearing Liam's uniform. Kneeling. Bleeding. Calling someone's name that Marcus couldn't hear. Then the dream collapsed. The return to the bench. Marcus gasped awake, breath sharp and uneven. The desert wind had died completely. The notebook lay beside him, untouched, but now it felt like it was watching him. Goddamn dreams, he whispered, rubbing his face. Goddamn ghosts. He picked up the notebook and slid it back into his pocket, but the sensation lingered, like something unseen had gripped his wrist a moment too long. He stood. His legs felt weak. There were nights when the past visited him like a familiar enemy. But tonight the past had brought the future with it, and that was something entirely different. The walk back. Fort Caden at night wasn't truly silent. The silence only pretended. The wind muttered. The metal of old hangars ticked as if cooling from remembered heat. Insects scratched their own language into the dark. And somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, a sound Marcus always every single time mistook for a gunshot. He paused, closed his eyes, waited for his pulse to steady. It didn't. He forced himself forward anyway. The barracks loomed like old bones in moonlight. The mess hall, abandoned at this hour, smelled faintly of coffee soaked into wood. He passed by the training field, floodlights off, but the outlines of the obstacles casting long, crooked shadows. When he reached his quarters, he stopped at the door, hand on the knob. He suddenly wasn't sure he wanted to go inside. Inside meant walls. Walls meant memory had fewer places to hide. Get it together, Hale, he muttered, but even his voice sounded reluctant. He stepped inside. The room was small, tidy, and painfully familiar. Single bed, metal desk, 2 framed pictures, a lamp that flickered on bad nights, and the old wooden footlocker that held too many reminders. Marcus shut the door, locked it, then leaned against it for a long moment, breathing like a man who had been running even though he hadn't moved. Why now? He whispered. He had lived with nightmares for years. But this one, Dawson talking as if he were alive, seeing things Marcus couldn't know yet, this wasn't normal memory replay. This felt like a warning. He shook his head. You're losing it, he told himself. That's all. But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. The notebook opens itself. He sat on the bed and pulled the notebook out of his pocket. The wind hadn't touched it. The cover wasn't open. But the binding was stretched, as if it had recently been forced open wide. Marcus stared. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened to the last page he had read. The handwriting there wasn't Dawson's neat, slanted script. It was different, hastier, written with a heavier hand. The ink was fresher. He's the next chapter, Sarge. Don't let him end the same way I did. Marcus froze. His mouth went dry. No, he said quietly. No. That's impossible. He shut the notebook, sat back, stared at nothing. Something deep in his chest, a place he'd boarded up long ago, began to ache in a way he had no words for. A way he'd hoped he'd never feel again. Because he knew what this meant. He had a choice. He could pretend the dream was only a dream. He could pretend the writing was only memory misfiring. Or he could accept that something was coming. Something tied to Liam. Something tied to Ridge 14. Something tied to him. Marcus lowered his head into his hands. God help me, he whispered. Not again. He dreamed again without sleeping. Still sitting upright, eyes open, Marcus saw the desert bench blur. For a flash, half a breath, Liam was there, sitting where Dawson once sat, holding the notebook. And behind him stood a figure Marcus recognized but wished he didn't. Dawson. His face calm. His eyes no longer black. But his expression carried a message. It's starting. Marcus blinked, and the vision vanished. But the dread did not. 2 weeks into Liam's deployment, the first letter arrived earlier than expected. It wasn't mailed the usual way. No stamp. No processing mark. Just an envelope shoved under Marcus's door while he slept. He found it in the morning lying on the floor, half lit by the weak dawn leaking through the blinds. His stomach tightened. He knelt slowly, every motion deliberate, as if the letter might detonate. He picked it up. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Private Liam Dorsey. Marcus sat on the bed. His fingers hesitated at the flap. Then he tore it open. The letter. The paper smelled faintly like dust and diesel, the scent of new war. Sergeant Hale. We touched down 3 days ago. The heat hits like a fist, and the nights get cold enough you wonder if the desert is trying to kill you slowly instead of fast. I don't know how much I can say, but we're already running missions. Mostly patrols. Mostly quiet. But yesterday something weird happened. I saw a boy, couldn't have been more than 15. He stared at me like he knew me. Like he recognized me from somewhere I've never been. Then he said something in a dialect none of us knew. The translator looked confused. He said the boy was using old phrasing, the kind used in stories, not everyday speech. Only one word was clear. Chapter. He pointed at me when he said it. Anyway, I don't know why I'm writing this part. I just felt connected. Like maybe it meant something to you. You told me soldiers carried 2 names. Maybe I'm about to learn mine. I hope things are quiet back home. Tell me how the bench is doing. Liam. Marcus exhaled shakily. The bench. Even Liam knew. Even if he didn't understand what. But the boy, the one who said chapter, that was a thread Marcus couldn't ignore. It felt like someone else was writing the story now, and none of them had agreed to be characters. Marcus folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, then stood and paced the length of the room. Back and forth, slow, measured, breath uneven. He stopped at the mirror. His reflection looked older than last week. The sleepless nights had carved deeper shadows beneath his eyes. His shoulders carried the posture of someone bracing for impact. "This isn't coincidence," he murmured. He reached for Dawson's notebook. The notebook opens to a page he never turned. When Marcus opened it, the pages fluttered on their own, as if a hidden breeze moved through them, and stopped halfway in. The handwriting was Dawson's. But the words, they weren't from any day Marcus remembered. "Sometimes I think stories aren't written by the living. Sometimes I think we only finish what the dead already started." Beneath it, scrawled in darker ink, "Watch the boy. They always send a warning first." Marcus's throat tightened. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself. "It can't be real." But he didn't sound convinced. Flashback, Ridge 14. The warning he ignored. Memory surged up without mercy. He was back on Ridge 14. Smoke. Dust. The metallic taste of fear. But this time the flashback shifted, no longer the same replay he'd suffered for years. This one revealed a moment he had forgotten entirely. Dawson tugging at his shoulder earlier that morning. "Hey, Sarge." Marcus was cleaning grit out of his rifle's chamber. "Yeah. You ever feel like something's pulling you toward a place you're not supposed to be?" Marcus had barely looked up. "It's nerves. Everybody gets them." But Dawson had shaken his head. "No, this is different. I had a dream last night. It wasn't like the others." Marcus remembered pausing, but only for a second. He'd been too tired, too worn, too focused on the logistics of the next patrol. What kind of dream? Dawson looked out toward the ridge. The horizon shimmered like heat carving the world apart. "I saw myself," he said quietly. "But I wasn't alive." He hesitated. "And someone was reading from this notebook. Someone I'd never met." Marcus remembered scoffing. "You're rattled. Get some sleep while you can." Dawson had opened his mouth again. But he didn't continue. And now Marcus realized that was the moment. The warning. The same kind of warning Liam was now receiving from a foreign boy whispering chapter. The same pattern. The same shape. Like a story repeating itself. Marcus's heart pounded. He whispered into the empty room. "I ignored him." And the memory answered, not with sound but with a wave of guilt so heavy it buckled his knees. The medic who remembered more than he did. Hours later, Marcus found himself on the far side of Fort Caden, walking toward the old infirmary. His steps felt guided by something deeper than choice. Inside, a man in his 60s sat at a desk sorting medical files. His hair was gray. His hands steady. His gaze sharp. Corpsman Elias Grant. The medic from Ridge 14. One of the few who survived. Marcus hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. Grant looked up. His expression shifted immediately. "Hale." Pause. "You look like someone dug you out of yesterday." Marcus didn't bother denying it. "I need to talk," he said. "About the ridge." Grant's face tightened, not in anger but in recognition. "In memory." "You're having them again?" the medic murmured. "The dreams?" Marcus nodded. Grant stood and closed the door. "Sit," he said. "This won't be short." They sat across from each other. Two survivors. Two ghosts. Grant leaned back, hands folded over his stomach. "You think you remember what happened on Ridge 14, he said softly. "But you don't. None of us do." Marcus's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Grant's eyes sharpened. "We lost time up there." Marcus blinked. "Lost time?" Grant nodded slowly. "I've never told anyone. Not the officers. Not the shrink. But the timeline of the battle doesn't line up. We were pinned for nearly 6 hours. The event logs say too. I was treating wounds that shouldn't have been possible in that time frame. I was moving between positions that were farther apart than they should have felt." Marcus stared, a chill crawling up his spine. "What are you saying?" Grant exhaled. "I think something happened on that ridge that wasn't linear." Marcus's skin prickled. Grant continued. "And the worst part?" Dawson knew. "He said something to me before he died, something I didn't understand at the time." Marcus leaned forward, pulse racing. "What did he say?" Grant fixed him with a steady, haunted gaze. "He said, 'We're not in the right chapter.'" Marcus's blood turned to ice. Grant added, voice low. "And then he told me you'd come one day. He said you'd be back for answers." Marcus stood without realizing it. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. No, he whispered. No, this can't. But Grant wasn't finished. Hale, he said softly, whatever started on Ridge 14, it didn't end there. Marcus closed his eyes. And in the darkness behind his eyelids he saw Liam again, kneeling in smoke, reaching for something, or someone, Marcus couldn't see. The night Liam heard his name in a language he did not know. War announces itself quietly at first, before the explosions, before the screaming, before the radio turns into a desperate lifeline. It begins with a shift in the air, a subtle tension that creeps into bones before minds understand why. Liam felt that shift on the 12th night of deployment, a feeling like the desert itself was holding its breath. He was in an outpost carved into a ridge, not unlike the one Marcus had bled on years ago. The same shapes of shadow, the same uneasy quiet. The moon was thin, a blade of pale silver cutting through the sky. Liam stood at the observation platform, scanning the darkness. Another soldier, Reyes, stood beside him chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping him awake. Feels wrong tonight, Reyes muttered. Yeah, Liam said. Feels tight. Reyes squinted at him. Tight. Liam exhaled. Like the night's waiting. Reyes snorted. You been writing poetry with the desert kids again? Liam almost laughed. Almost, but something in the air kept the humor from landing. Then Liam froze. Someone whispered his name. Not in English. Not in any language he recognized. Not in any human tone at all. A low, distant murmur carried by the wind. Liam. Reyes didn't react. You hear that? Liam asked sharply. Hear what? Liam's heartbeat stumbled. He scanned the ridge again. Nothing. No movement. No silhouette. No signs of life. But the whisper came again, this time right behind him, so close he felt breath on the back of his neck. Chapter. Liam spun. There was no one there. His pulse hammered against his ribs, desperate to break free. Reyes frowned. You good man? Liam swallowed. Yeah. Just tired. But he wasn't tired. He was terrified. Because the voice wasn't human. And the desert shouldn't have known his end. The ambush that started before it began. Gunfire erupted before the alarms. Reyes barely had time to shout before a round cracked past his head. Soldiers scrambled, boots slamming the ground, radios barking. Contact north. Contact north. Liam dropped behind the sandbag wall, rifle up, breath sharp. Adrenaline surged through him like electricity. He trained for this. But training wasn't war. War was chaos wearing a familiar face. Shadows moved in the distance. Muzzle flashes lit the ridge. The outpost roared with responding fire. Liam scanned his sector, shapes running between rock formations too fast to count. Reyes shouted, two moving left. Liam fired. Once. Twice. A third burst. Then. A flash of movement directly ahead. A silhouette. Too close. Too sudden. Liam turned his rifle. And froze in horror. The silhouette wasn't holding a weapon. It was the boy. The same boy from the village. The same one who'd whispered chapter. The same one who was staring at Liam as if expecting him. Time snapped. The sound of battle warped into a muffled hum. The boy's eyes were dark pools reflecting a fire Liam couldn't see. He lifted his hand slowly. And pointed at Liam. Just like before. But this time he said something else. A single word. Again. And then the world exploded. A mortar hit the north trench. Soldiers screamed. The shockwave threw Liam onto his back. By the time he scrambled upright, ears ringing, dust choking his lungs, the boy was gone. Vanished. Not running. Not falling. Just gone. Like he had been erased from the moment. The battle raged on, but Liam wasn't fighting anymore. He was shaking. Because the boy's last word echoed through him like a memory he'd never lived. Again. 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 As if this moment had happened before. As if the war was repeating itself. As if he'd been here, on this ridge, in another life. Marcus receives a message that should not exist. It was 4:17 a.m. when Marcus woke to his phone buzzing. A number he didn't recognize. He answered anyway. A weak, static-choked voice came through first, but not Liam's. Sarge? Hale? You there? Marcus sat up straight. Who is this? Static flared. Then, the voice again. Broken. Faint. Familiar. Miller. Marcus's blood ran cold. Miller was dead. Killed on Ridge 14. Shot during the advance. But the voice was him. The same strained rasp. The same faint tremor. Miller? Marcus whispered. This is impossible. The voice coughed wetly like lungs full of sand. It's happening, again? Marcus's throat closed. What's happening again? Static surged. Then the voice, quieter now fading, said, You didn't finish the story? The line cut. Marcus stared at the phone as if it had betrayed him. The room felt suddenly too small. He couldn't breathe. He reached for Dawson's notebook with shaking hands. But before he could open it, it fell open on its own. To a page that hadn't existed until now. A new line written in handwriting that did not belong to any living person. He saw the boy too. Marcus's stomach dropped. He whispered, No. He flipped the page. And froze. Under the fresh ink was a sketch. A pencil drawing. Of Liam. Standing on a ridge drenched in smoke. Pointing at something unseen. And behind him, barely visible, was a second figure. Dawson. Watching. Flashback. The 13 minutes that appeared. Marcus's mind cracked open again, memory pouring out like water from a ruptured canteen. He was back on Ridge 14. Dawson hadn't died the way Marcus remembered. No. There had been a moment before the shot, a moment his mind had always skipped. 13 minutes missing from every report. From every memory. From every account. 13 minutes that didn't fit any timeline. Now he saw them. He saw himself frozen, staring into the dust. He saw Dawson standing in front of him, unharmed. He saw the sky ripple like a heat mirage. He saw shadow shapes moving through the sand, shapes that looked like men but weren't. He heard Dawson whisper, We're stuck in someone else's story, Sarge. And they're not done telling it. Then, a flash, a scream. A gunshot that ripped the world back into order. And Dawson fell. Marcus had always remembered that part. But not what came before it. Not the impossible. Not the 13 minutes where the world broke. The classified report. Grant found Marcus hours later. I knew you'd be up here, the medic said, stepping into the deserted training field. Marcus didn't turn. Tell me. Grant held a file. The edges crisp with dust. The cover stamped. Classified, Level 6 clearance required. Operation R14/Temporal Incident Record. Marcus stared at him. Temporal? Grant nodded. They never told the public. They barely told the survivors. But Ridge 14 wasn't a normal battle. Something happened there, something outside physics. Marcus took the file with trembling hands. He opened it. Inside were pages of contradictory timestamps. Witness accounts that contradicted each other. Medical logs from impossible moments. Gunshot wounds noted before the firefight began. Reports of soldiers being seen in 2 positions at once. One line repeated on multiple pages. Perceived timeline distortion. Another. Individuals reported hearing their own names spoken by unknown voices. And the final note, written by an officer Marcus vaguely remembered. Recommend total silence regarding the anomalous entity described by Private Dawson. Marcus looked up sharply. Entity? Grant nodded. He wasn't talking to ghosts, Hale. He was talking to something the rest of us couldn't see. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. What did he describe? Grant inhaled slowly. A child, he said. Between 12 and 15. With black eyes. Who spoke in stories. And, who pointed at him. Marcus's heart stopped. Grant added. And Dawson said the boy called him something. What? Marcus whispered. Grant met his gaze. Chapter. The same word. The same boy. The same pattern. Marcus felt the notebook in his pocket grow heavier as if responding. This is happening again, he said. Grant nodded grimly. And this time the boy isn't pointing at Dawson. Marcus swallowed. He's pointing at Liam. Dawson's notebook vibrated in Marcus's hand. He opened it. A new sentence appeared as the graphite formed itself on paper. You have one chance to stop it. Marcus turned the page. And the final warning appeared, freshly written, the lines trembling like they'd been carved by a shaking hand. He won't survive the next ridge. Marcus's breath caught. His pulse thundered. The truth hit him with the force of a mortar shell. Liam was walking into the same fate as Dawson. And this time, Marcus wasn't sure he could change the story. Something inside Ian cracked. Not loudly. Not like a twig. More like the soft tear of fabric. The kind that makes you freeze because you know it can't be fixed. She felt herself slipping out of the dream but not waking up. Instead, she fell downward into another layer, a place that felt older than memory. A child's voice called again. Not the girl this time. A boy. Ein, come back. Her breath caught. Her throat closed. Her hands trembled in the dark. She knew that voice. It belonged to her younger brother, Halim. A name she hadn't allowed anyone to speak for years. "No," she whispered through the dream. "Not you. Not here." But the dust swirled again, shaping itself into the outline of a small boy. Bare feet. A slingshot in his back pocket. A mischievous smile that used to annoy her, then became the smile she would have killed an entire battalion to see again. He looked up at her with those bright amber eyes. "Why did you leave?" he asked. The question stabbed straight through her ribs. She tried to speak, but her jaw locked. Her breath had turned to iron. The desert wind echoed with distant screams, real ones from years ago, rolling over the dunes like trapped ghosts. "I didn't leave you," she finally forced out, voice shaking. "I tried to save you. But you didn't." His smile collapsed. His eyes dimmed. And then the world shifted violently. White flash. Buildings collapsing. Running soldiers. Her hands covered in someone else's blood. Her radio screaming her name. Halim's hand slipping from hers. Dust, dust, dust everywhere. Ayn dropped to her knees. "Stop it," she growled, pressing her palms to her skull. "Stop it. Stop." The boy reached toward her, but his hand dissolved into sand before touching her. His voice, however, lingered, echoing around her like a broken lullaby. "You left me in the dust." The desert floor cracked beneath Ayn, splitting open like a fault line. She fell again, this time not into memory but into a void. Silence. Black. Endless. For one heartbeat, she wondered if this was death. Then she heard another voice, deep, steady, and sharp enough to slice through the dark. "Ayn, get up." Her eyes snapped open. This voice she recognized instantly. Commander Rafik. But it wasn't his usual tone. It was angry and afraid. "Wake up. Now." The dray. "I'm shattered." The midnight summons. Ayn gasped awake, soaked in sweat, grabbing for her rifle before her mind even caught up. The barracks were dark except for the dim blue emergency lights casting long shadows on the concrete floor. Commander Rafik stood beside her bunk, boots planted hard, jaw tight, eyes focused on her like she might shatter if he blinked. "You were screaming," he said quietly. Ayn wiped her face with a trembling hand. I didn't realize." "You almost suffocated yourself," he added, nodding toward her chest. She noticed then, her vest was still half on, wrapped too tightly, constricting her ribs from when she'd fallen asleep during gear inspection. She inhaled sharply and pain radiated across her lungs. Rafik knelt beside her, something he had never done for anyone. "You're not fine," he said, preempting her reflexive denial. Ayn looked away, clenching her teeth. "I said I'm fine. You were crying." Her head snapped toward him. "No, I wasn't. You think I haven't heard soldiers cry in their sleep?" His tone softened barely. "You think I don't know the sound?" Ayn's jaw loosened. Silence stretched between them. Finally she whispered, "Why are you here?" "Because General Sarin wants you," Rafik replied. "Now." Immediately. A cold, heavy knot twisted in her stomach. "Why?" Rafik hesitated, another thing he never did. "That's the part one don't like," he said. "He wouldn't tell me." Ayn slid out of the bunk, her legs still unsteady from the dream. She grabbed her boots, but Rafik stopped her hand. "You're shaking," he observed. "It's just adrenaline." "It's not adrenaline," he said, eyes narrowing at her. "You're scared." She froze. He wasn't wrong. She hated that he wasn't wrong. "Whatever you're dealing with," Rafik continued, "you need to lock it down before we see him. Sarin doesn't tolerate cracks." Ayn stood tall, shoulders straightening, expression hardening into the soldier she forced herself to be. "No cracks," she said firmly. But Rafik saw the way her fingers trembled as she tied her boots. He noticed everything. The general. The hallway to the command wing felt colder than usual. Ayn walked behind Rafik, matching his pace, though every step felt like walking deeper into a storm she couldn't see. When they reached the general's door, Rafik gave her one last glance. "You sure you're steady?" Ayn nodded. "What? But steady enough." Rafik opened the door. Inside, General Sarin stood with his back to them, looking at a large projection of the city map, glowing red zones marking recent attacks. "Ayn Halim," Sarin said without turning. "Step forward." She did. Rafik remained by the door, a guard, not a participant. Sarin finally faced her. His gaze was sharp enough to peel skin. His voice controlled, cold. "You've been selected for an assignment," he said. "One that requires emotional precision." Ayn's heartbeat stuttered. Sir? Saren tapped the map. A new territory blinked at the edge, Sector 9. A cursed zone. A place she avoided even looking at on maps. A place connected to her past. You will infiltrate Sector 9 and locate a target we believe is tied to the resurgence of the militant forces. Ain's breathing hitched. Sector 9 was where she lost her brother. Where she last saw him alive. Saren noticed the flicker in her expression. Is there a problem, soldier? No, sir. Another lie. Saren smiled barely. Good. Because if you fail, others will die. Something inside Ayn tightened. She felt the dream's dust clawing at the back of her mind again. Halim's voice whispering. You left me. Saren continued. You leave at dawn. Ayn saluted and turned to exit, but Saren added one more sentence, one she wasn't prepared for. And Ayn, we have intel suggesting someone from your past may still be alive in that sector. Her blood turned to ice. She spoke without turning around. Who? Saren's smile deepened. You already know who. The room spun. Her heart dropped. Rafik tensed. Ayn whispered, barely audible. Halim. The waking shadow. Ayn walked out of the general's office in perfect military form, straight spine, steady steps, unreadable face. But the moment the heavy steel door closed behind her, her breath collapsed. Not loudly. Just a quiet shudder that betrayed a fault line deep beneath her ribs. Rafik noticed. Ayn. She kept walking. Ayn. His voice sharpened. She stopped. Rafik stepped in front of her, blocking the hallway, eyes searching hers. What did he say to you? She swallowed hard. Nothing. Ayn. Nothing that concerns you. Move. Her tone was ice, but her hands were shaking again. She tried to hide them, curling her fingers into fists, but Rafik caught the tremor. You're lying, he said quietly. She glared up at him. You don't get to tell me what I'm doing. I do, he countered, when you're falling apart. His words hit her like a slap. Falling apart. She wanted to deny it. Wanted to push past him, bury it, forget it. But her throat tightened instead. The dream still clung to her, its dust, its voices, its ghosts. Rafik stepped closer. What happened in there? Ayn looked away. Orders. Orders don't make you look like you've seen death. She didn't answer. Rafik lowered his voice. Ayn, who is Halim? Her entire body froze. He had heard. He had heard her whisper it in the office. Slowly, Ayn lifted her eyes to his. Her voice was barely a breath. He was my brother. Rafik inhaled sharply, understanding dawning. The sector. The assignment. The tremors. The nightmares. You think he's alive, Rafik said. Ayn didn't answer. She couldn't. Not when the possibility ripped open every wound she'd spent years stitching shut. Rafik's expression softened, a rare, fragile thing she didn't know he was capable of. Why didn't you tell me? Ayn shook her head. You can't understand. Try me. You didn't see him die. The words burst out of her before she could stop them. Raw. Unfiltered. Bleeding. Rafik stepped back, stunned. And suddenly, unexpectedly, Ayn found herself speaking. The explosion, we were running. I had his hand. I had it. And then? Her voice cracked. Not loudly. Just enough to expose the fracture beneath. I turned back for 1 second. And the dust swallowed him. Her breath shook. Her eyes burned. Her composure shattered. I thought it was my fault, she whispered. I still think. Rafik reached out, steadying her shoulder. Ayn, listen to me. His voice was firm, grounding. If Saren says there's a chance your brother is alive, then we're going to find him. Together. She looked at him. Together? She repeated, almost disbelieving. Rafik nodded. You're not going into Sector 9 alone. Not while you're like this. Ayn swallowed the rising emotion, forcing herself to stand straighter. No, she said softly. I have to go alone. Those were his orders. Rafik scowled. Then the general is a fool. Ayn almost laughed, a short, broken exhale. Rafik stepped aside, finally allowing her to pass. Get some rest, he said. Dawn comes fast. But as she walked away, he added one more sentence, one she didn't expect. And Ayn, if you see something in the dust, don't follow it. She didn't turn around. But his warning lingered in the dark. Because she already knew. The dust was not done with her. Not even close. Ayn, a soldier with unresolved trauma, experiences vivid nightmares filled with dust, shadows, and haunting visions of her younger brother Halim, who was lost years ago during an explosion in a militant-controlled sector. In the dream, Halim accuses her of abandoning him, triggering deep guilt and emotional fractures Ayan can barely suppress. She wakes violently, almost suffocating, and Commander Rafik witnesses her breakdown for the first time. He's alarmed by how shaken she is, but she denies anything is wrong. The general summons. General Saren calls Ayan in during the night and assigns her a dangerous infiltration mission into Sector 9, the same cursed district where her brother disappeared. Saren then reveals shocking intelligence. Someone from Ayan's past may still be alive in that sector. Ayan immediately realizes who he means. Halim. Ayan comes apart. After the meeting, Ayan breaks emotionally. Rafik corners her, demanding to know what's happening. She tries to keep her composure but fails, finally revealing. Halim was her brother. She lost him during an explosion years ago. She blames herself. She has never recovered. Rafik is shaken but promises not to let her face this alone. Ayan insists she must. The mission is solo. He warns her. If you see something in the dust, don't follow it. But deep inside, Ayan knows she already will. The pull of the past is too strong. The ghosts are calling.